Goeiedag. Drugs. Dat zijn dingen die je bij een apotheek kunt kopen. Maar ook genotsmiddelen, ook heroïne, cocaïne. Toch zijn er drugs die op een hele andere manier gebruikt kunnen worden. Die gebruikt kunnen worden als geneesmiddel. Die gebruikt kunnen worden als middel om je eigen geest te verkennen. Eigenlijk is het jammer dat het woord drugs, wat oorspronkelijk bedoeld was voor geneesmiddel, die bijbetekenis heeft gekregen van verslaving. Eric Taub is een Amerikaan die werkt met een middel dat heet ibogaine. En dat gebruikt wordt om juist die andere toepassingen van drugs naar voren te halen. Die ibogaine is dus een middel zoals LSD, als paddo's, het spul wat in paddo's zit. Dus psilocybine. Een middel wat te vergelijken valt met de werking van psychedelica in het algemeen. Maar ibogaine heeft een heel bijzondere eigenschap. En dat is dat het sommige mensen kan helpen om van een andere drugsverslaving af te komen. We gaan praten met Eric Taub. Hij komt dus uit Amerika. We doen het in het Engels. Welcome Eric. First, let's start with telling what ibogaine is.
Ibogaine, or ibogaine, is an alkaloid that's extracted from a West African shrub by the name of Tabernaty iboga. And I believe originally it was found in the Rift Valley, where paleontologists and anthropologists have shared with me, was in a place during the beginning of human evolution. The pygmies there brought ibogaine, Tabernaty iboga, out and traveled with it and shared it with the West Central African countries of Gabon and the Republic of Congo and Cameroon.
So you're saying this shrub, this plant was known a long time ago, and it actually came from where the origin of humankind are to be found.
Right. Some people even believe that the plant iboga is one of the derivatives, so to speak, from the original tree of life, if there was such an actual tree. Who knows, but it's an
We get into biblical terms here. The tree of life is where Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eve, and it must have been a great place, they took fruit from a forbidden tree, and that gave them forbidden knowledge. Now, sometimes people say...
Self-awareness.
Let's call it awareness. Some people say that extracts like ibogaine or ayahuasca or the psychedelic plants do give you a higher level of awareness. Do you feel that's true?
I feel that can be true. It depends a lot upon the intent of the individual in terms of the type of pilgrimage that they come to an experience to receive. But then again, with a person that has pure intent, walking across the street and chewing a piece of gum is going to give them an experience of enlightenment.
Yeah. So there's many ways, but this is it's a psychedelic concoction. It gives you visions and other. Could you describe what it does to you if you take this ibogaine, and in what form do you take it?
Right. Well, there's many different forms that it can be taken. It can be taken in its more organic form, or it can be taken as a pure hydrochloride extraction from the 13 alkaloids located in the plant.
Do you mean this is like a powder then?
Yeah, it can be taken that way as well. It's pretty arduous to take it in its original state. It takes a tremendous amount of material to consume, and it's difficult to maintain without throwing it up during a 2 and 3 day ritual in West Central Africa. So what we've
when
done,
you say the original form is you take the leaves from this plant and you chew them.
right, the bark shavings, which is the place where ibogaine is located the most in the bark shavings. And so they take grams and grams and grams, and it's pretty difficult to keep it in. And so what we've done is a couple of things. One of the things we've done is create a purified total alkaloid solution, which includes all the alkaloids located in the plant, but in a hydrochloride state. So 2 or 3 capsules, and a person receives the essence energy of the plant, which they could have an interrelationship with during their experience without having to go through the very arduous 2 or 3 day ordeal.
Okay. Now, chemically, extracts like ayahuasca, which is a Brazilian brew that has similar effects, contain a high degree of DMT. Yes. Is ibogaine of the same chemical nature?
It's actually quite different. A biochemist once looked at the difference between ayahuasca and ibogaine, and he said, which is interesting, he said that there's an extra added component or an extra facet to the diamond, to ibogaine, which I believe enables people to maintain their identification with the adult that's reliving this unleashing of repressed memories, these pictorial gestalts in the hundreds and hundreds over a period, actually much longer, much longer than an ayahuasca session. These sessions usually last 25 to 40 hours. And I think that...
compared to an ayahuasca session which lasts about 2 or 3 hours.
Even 3 to 6 or 9 hours, yeah. And it's very rare that a person desires to do an ibogaine session more often than once a year, because it takes many weeks and months of a series of assimilation and reintegration windows of time.
But we're now touching on the psychotherapeutic use of the stuff. First, there is this ritual use by the Pygmies and other tribes in Africa. We've heard from Mr. Lieberman, who did research with those people, that not funny, but very interesting, that, for instance, the incidence of AIDS is far less with the Pygmies compared to the tribes around it that don't take the ibogaine. So the ibogaine also seems to have some other medical benefits.
Yeah, well, the only thing that I found out about that particularly is that physical therapists have done sessions with people before and after their experience, and they found that the lymphatic system has been cleansed profoundly. Old injuries, lumps, and bumps literally disappear overnight when people do a session. But other than that, I don't know any physical positive side effects.
But so it is a strong, say, tool for psychotherapeutic work.
Yeah.
In general, does that mean that people have a residue, a traumatic, an archive of traumatic experience in their body, in their mind? They remember when they were a child, they fell out of this, or their mother beat them, all that stuff. That's one aspect. It's ibogaine a good tool to bring that back into
balance, yeah, into wholeness. There seems to be a tremendous, profound discharge of extraneous material, superfluous to our intrinsic self, when a person does an ibogaine session. 48 hours afterwards, the mind is much more quiet, and a person's able to watch their reactive behavior much more carefully. And that's very significant in a person's ability to behaviorally change patterns that they want to change.
Would you say that the classical psychoanalytic approach, whereby you make people fish in their pool of unworked out, of residue, of traumas, that takes a long time, many sessions. Would you say that ibogaine does that faster, quicker?
Yes, it does. I've come across people who have come to a session experiencing obsessive-compulsive behavior. They're putting the knives and the forks together, and they're lining up their clothes for the next day, and they're spending 60-70% of their time doing these activities. They do an ibogaine session, and what they get in touch with is that they've been masking a certain level of depression with this obsessive-compulsive behavior. People go in depressed, they come out being able to get in touch with their anger. People go in with anger, they come out being able to get more in touch with their sadness. And from sadness to joy, from joy to emptiness. And then, for example, there was one particular woman who went in having had 20 years of everything she's ever wanted to experience in her life. She said to me she never woke up one morning without not being happy until she did ibogaine. And the next morning she was very frustrated. And it was because what she wanted to do with the experience was she wanted to to accumulate yet another New Age way to keep herself from experiencing a deeper level of emptiness, which is what she was experiencing, because she was about the most self-satisfied individual in terms of having already created a healthy sense of self or a healthy ego. She was ready without knowing it, because the New Age movement has very little information about taking the next step after being fully empowered. So it was until she completed her vacation in Costa Rica and she went back home that she realized that she had kicked in to a state of unity where she was witnessing her sleep, and she was utilizing about 1/4 of the amount of energy to do the work that she was usually doing in the world. And it took about 11 months of being in this flow, in this constant flow of the inside and the outside being in accord, for some rough edges to begin to accumulate around her. So that was from emptiness to a state of enlightenment.
But you could say it's a
layers of the onion that are peeled, and nobody can skip a step. It's not a magic bullet. You can't go in depressed and come out happy, but you can get in touch with the process along the way that will speed the session, will speed that process up.
Could you call this like a key, a golden key into the subconscious or the unconscious?
I would say it's one of the very, very wonderful methods through this healing plant that facilitates that.
Now, Eric, you do work with groups and individuals with this plant, with this, what some people would call drug, this psychedelic substance. Some people call it an entheogen, a way to get in touch with the God within. Tell me something about that group work.
Well, it's only done actually individually. Group per se, because perhaps over a week's time we can find a half a dozen cabins, and a person will begin, and then 6 or 7 hours later, and then another 15 hours later. And it's a very individual thing. Each individual, for this kind of process, needs to have a comfortable, separate space from one another, to have at least 2, if not 3 solid days to themselves to go through the stages of this process.
So this is not a party drug?
To say the least. It's the first thing that people realize when they take this is that it's not a recreational experience, and then they realize why it never hit the streets, and it never will. In America, it's the only drug, the only illegal drug on the Class 1 drug list that was basically never confiscated on the streets.
Well, the same was said about ketamine, which also gives a very deep experience at time, and yet people having used it a number of times, they also made it a businessman's drug for afternoon hits. Yeah,
this is a long, arduous process that takes 2 to 3 days, and then thereafter there's a metabolite that's created when the ibogaine interacts with the biochemistry in the brain. The metabolite takes weeks and months to wash out. In the case of an addict, the metabolite, which fills the receptors, has to do with the elimination of craving for their particular substance of choice. When it comes to an initiation or a spiritual experience, this metabolite, I believe, enables people to witness their behavior more closely and allow the emptiness that they experience from this discharge of material, these file cabinets that seem to be thrown out of the subconscious, to create a situation where a person becomes much, much quieter. And this is not something that lasts for a day, but goes on for weeks and months, and then integrates into the individual because of the metabolite, I believe.
Now, you mentioned
also because of the very deep deconstruction of the ego that takes place during the experience. And that's just a biochemical consideration, but it's a holistic approach.
So you lose the defense systems. Now, coming back to that metabolistic process, one of the aspects of ibogaine is that if someone is addicted to another drug, like heroin or whatever, that ibogaine can help them because of like filling up the need to kick the habit.
Well, the first thing is a given, which is that the cocaine, the heroin, or even a methadone addict will not have to go through the agony of any withdrawal whatsoever. They'll come out of the experience 36 hours later without having to go through an iota of withdrawal. To them, much more so than to me, that's a miracle. And that's a 100% given situation.
When you say 100%, that's been proven in many cases.
That's been proven every time we do a session. A person does not have to go through the agony of withdrawal or the physical withdrawal from drugs, which keeps people very often in the habit of doing drugs because they're just so afraid of going through that terrible agony of the withdrawal process. So
it keeps them on the drug because kicking it, stopping with it, they would feel very bad in the body and sick and for days and weeks. Right. So with ibogaine you can do that now, but that touches on the other danger that people that do ibogaine and at the same time do heroin are in a more risky situation. That's a case that happened in Holland and has led to some serious problems.
We have to make sure that a person doesn't potentiate heroin by taking it any time during the ibogaine session.
Potentiating, meaning making the effect more stronger and with the potential danger of overdosing.
Absolutely, right. It's very important to keep those two things separate. And for an individual that's addicted to heroin, for example, would be taking their last heroin amount during a time that's most comfortable for them, as far from the ingestion of the ibogaine as possible. If that's 4 hours, or that's 6 hours, or 24 hours, usually in the case of methadone, that's the amount of time that we allow for them to take their last drug of choice.
So you have
safe, completely safe.
You have worked with people that kick the habit by this way. Why is in Holland we have serious problems with people that are addicted. The rest of the world likewise. People tend to become criminals. They are very unhealthy. Why has science, why has the medical profession not embraced ibogaine in an earlier stage?
Well, that's a good question. People give me information as to why, and I just listen and wonder, could that be? One reason, particularly in America, is the AMA wants a piece of the action, and there are a lot.
You have to explain that AMA is the American Medical Association. So the doctors who now make, in fact, money from people being addicted and they subscribe.
Addiction, rehab.
There's a whole industry around drugs, of course.
It's $1 billion business, as is the methadone industry, $1 billion business.
That's in fact a weird idea. So the doctors who are supposed to protect us and the government is not using this venue of ibogaine or even any other potential research venues to stop addiction. Why is that? Is there a conspiracy?
I don't know if there's a conspiracy, but you also have to consider that back in the 60s, all the psychoactive drugs in America were shelved, and it's just until very recently, literally the last couple of years, that major pharmaceutical companies are beginning to take these psychoactives off the shelves, and they're beginning to take a good look at these and wondering whether these psychoactives are going to be our next generation's antidepressants and so on.
Because in the meantime we have had quite a number of interesting new drugs, not only the antidepressive but also like Viagra, stimulants of all kinds. It feels like the old knowledge, because ibogaine, as you said, is age-old. So is ayahuasca, LSD maybe not, but there are functions there, fungi that were used. Is this a knowledge that we should regain as a society?
Oh, I do believe so, very much so. But just back to the previous point for a moment. I went to Mexico when I first heard about ibogaine because I have a lot of connections there, and I wanted to interest the medical community there to write a proposal to submit to a medical college so that their FDA would be interested in setting up a clinic, or at least a pilot study. They were ready to do this, writing up of this proposal, until I let them know the efficacy, the fact that, well, at the time, we thought that ibogaine was approximately 75% effective in alleviating all drug addiction. Since then, we've certainly augmented, from our own experience, the situation. But when we told them this, the doctors pulled back and they said, "We're sorry, but we can't help you because we don't want to put a threat to our families and our friends and our work here, because the drug lords use our roads to drive up through Mexico to the United States. And if you had a product that was like Laetrile in terms of its ability to put cancer into remission, that was maybe 10 to 30%.
A miracle drug you're talking about.
No, in other words, if you had a
miracle drug against drug addiction.
That was too threatening to them. If it was something that was less threatening, that didn't have such a high success rate, they would have been okay with it. So I said to them, "You mean to say that you don't want to work with this because it works so well?" And they said, "Please, you're embarrassing us. Go to a more autonomous country that's not so close to the powers that be. Go somewhere in Nicaragua or somewhere that's not so close to the FDA in America and the drug lords coming up our roads." And I said, okay, and started moving on, looking for other countries.
Because that's what you do. You cannot work in the States or in some Western countries. You have to go what you call offshore. You have to go to countries where there is less legal hassle. Right. And so you bring patients or clients or whatever you call them to those countries.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Is that an expensive trip?
Well, we try to keep the prices down. And as a result of a lot of wonderful people who are sympathizing to the cause, who have yachts and have beautiful homes in Costa Rica and Jamaica and elsewhere, we can keep the price down. We basically now, as a result of a much greater availability at a much cheaper price, we could have a very wide sliding scale. So now we don't have to refuse anyone, but it'll still cost them a certain amount, round trip and so on. But
well, that's there was a big psychedelic conference in Amsterdam a while ago, and one of the criticism was that lots of people from Germany and from Europe came. This is like a marketing trick to get people to experience. Ibogaine was not so much mentioned as ayahuasca or LSD or peyote. Some kind of drug tourism by the same New Age people you mentioned before. They've done it. They've done everything. They've tried everything. There's a new thing on the block.
Yeah.
Another toy.
Yeah.
And that I felt that's not the cause.
Absolutely not.
But try to concisely say, what is the psychedelic cause then? What is the cause of using these kind of materials?
Well, as far as a therapeutic and initiatory tool, again, it's a way to expedite a person's process to go deeper within themselves. A person goes in having taken a pilgrimage to this experience over a period of weeks and sometimes months. They get clear on a few very specific intentions that they want to explore and they want to wade through and they want to deal with in terms of the experience. And they go in with a lot of tension and a lot of intention to experience a breakthrough. I'll give you an example. A physician from the Midwest came down and did a session with me, and she told me that before she came down, basically she put her house in order as if she was going to die, because somewhere inside of her she knew she was going to experience a death. She had a very strong feeling it wasn't going to be physical death, but she knew that she was setting herself up to have a life-transforming experience, something that would create a discontinuous break with her past, a major initiation. And so she...
Because that is, in most initiation that we know from our tribal past, that was the idea, to bring you to make you die to yourself and come out better. But this is what some people would call a vague terrain, the vague mix between spirituality and psychotherapy. and most parents would tell their kids, stay away from this. This is cult-like danger. Yeah.
I'm sure most parents would. Well, maybe not in Amsterdam.
But this is the area where educators would say, stay away. This is you are entering a terrain that is not meant for you to go.
Absolutely, because you're dealing with a terrain that most people are extremely threatened to explore, and they project their own fears on whoever else and suggest that they don't do something like this, because this is an absolute exploring of the undercurrent of the social engine within your own self. This is very confronting to the status quo within the own individual. It's a breakdown of the ego, and it allows a more intrinsic orderliness to emerge from a deeper sense of self.
Well, if you talk to, say, a tantric teacher, and I mean a real Tibetan or Hindu clergyman, is someone who has done this, who has went through the process, he would say, if you want to have experience like this, and let's agree that it is not only ibogaine, but there's other drugs, and there's other, if you don't eat for a long time or pray or do meditation or stand on your head, whatever, you get the same kind of effects. He would say, yes, but this takes 20 years of preparation. So how can people that come from the Midwest, from a normal practice of being a doctor, driving the Cadillac and whatever, and then they go into this death experience? Isn't that a little bit too fast?
Let me just clarify that this isn't organic. To me, that means that it has the ability to interact with the individual in a very symbiotic way. It's not going to plow through a person's consciousness and give them this quintessential ego death if a person is not willing and ready for that to take place. To the degree in which the person is ready to let go, the plant will interrelate in such a way to facilitate that. And if a person doesn't want to explore a certain issue that comes up during the session, the energy will immediately be dispersed, and it'll say to itself, so you want to explore this? Okay, let's go further. So there's this built-in mechanism that I think only organics afford people, whereas something like LSD used to plow through a person's consciousness with its own entity, so to speak, and basically said, hey, you're going to explore this whether you like it or not. We're not talking about that kind of experience.
We're not. Yeah. Still, what I understood from other people said, yeah, the pygmies that use it, they take a fairly long preparation. It's like something you do when you're 5, but it takes long preparation in the body. You don't eat this, or you exercise. Maybe a few weeks preparation before you do an ibogaine session.
Yeah. Well, this process of intention for many people goes on for weeks and months. But also, I have to consider that we're living at a time when we've integrated a lot of other experiences in what I believe is our soul's history. And I think that we're at a point where a lot of us have done a lot of that work. And
you say that society has given us some kind of preparation for this ordeal, or this.
I don't think society has. I think we have, and our history, and we are made up of this tremendous history. And I think that we have already integrated a lot of this experience, so that we don't have to go through the usual rituals and rites to prepare the way the indigenous people prepare and prepared.
Okay, so summing it up, you would say ibogaine is an effective means to unlocking some hidden potential, some hidden dangers, some hidden trauma in your subconscious or your unconscious. And beside of that, it could be it is, in your view, a very valuable tool for fighting addictions.
That's about the summary, put very well.
Okay, this was Erik Taub. My name was Luc Sala, and we're in Amsterdam. Thank you.
Thank you.